and good afternoon, everyone. It's 1:05 p.m. on Wednesday, June 26th, and I called a committee on Parks, Enterprise Services, and Culture and the Arts meeting to order. I did it 2 times, just so that everybody know we're ready. I want to welcome Committee Vice Chair Okimoto, Councilmember Cordero, Councilmember Say, and Councilmember Tyler Dos Santo Tam. Okay. Pursuant to Section 92-3.7 Hawaii Revised Statute, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony on all items on the agenda in 2 ways: in person in the council chamber and remotely. In person and remotely, oral testimony will be allowed when each agenda item is taken up. Before testifying, each person shall state their name. Each speaker may not have anyone else read their statement and is limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. All persons who have registered to testify in person will be called upon first. When the timer goes off, please conclude your remarks promptly. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to testify following the registered testifiers. Once in-person testimony has concluded, I will proceed to remote testimony. All persons who have registered to testify remotely by video conference or telephone will be called upon. When your name is called, please monitor your screen and activate your audio feed when prompted. For persons who are testifying by telephone only, I will identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. When your phone number is called, please listen for the prompt and unmute by pressing *6. When I call for anyone else standing by remotely, please utilize the Zoom raise hand button to indicate your desire to speak. For those joining us by telephone only, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. So friendly reminders and tips. Video conference from a quiet location if possible. If you're watching the proceedings on Honolulu, please mute your television when you are called to testify. When the timer on the screen reaches 0, please conclude your remarks promptly. HRS Section 92-3, what's up? Oh. There's nobody participating remotely, right? You don't have to read that part. Okay, awesome. HR Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at remote meetings be conducted by roll call unless unanimous. Therefore, I will first call for objections, and then if there are any, I will call for a roll call vote. Written testimonies include the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, and will be available to the public as described on the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones for the duration of this meeting. Okay, members, item number 1, Resolution 24-153, accepting a gift of Miracle Playground parts to the city valued at $5,000 for use at various city parks under the jurisdiction of the Department of Parks and Recreation. And here from the administration, Director Laura Thielen.
Good afternoon, committee members. Laura Thielen on behalf of the Department of Parks and Recreation. We are grateful for the gift. The Hawaii Community Development Authority is dismantling a playground that's made of Miracle brand equipment, which is the same brand that we use at many of our playgrounds. So we will be able to repurpose a number of these pieces and use them to repair some of our playground areas. We are still waiting for a master agreement contract for us to be able to purchase some of this equipment, so this is a very welcome gift indeed.
Members, any questions for the director? Okay, we'll now proceed to in-person testimony in the council chamber.
There is no one, Mr. Chair.
Okay, there are no registered speakers. Is there anyone that would like to testify on the item? Look like no one is here. We'll now proceed to remote testimony.
There is no one online.
Okay, there are no remote registered speakers or persons joining us remotely. Okay, members, we are in discussion. Councilmember Okimoto.
Chair, not discussion, but actually I did have a question for Director Thielen, if that's okay. I know we passed the question part, but I thought of one. Aloha, Director Thielen. I was just wondering how you guys keep track of the playgrounds. You said this is to replace one that's been deteriorated. How do you guys keep track of which playgrounds? And there's a lot, and grateful for all the ones that are, throughout my district, but how do you keep track of them, and what kind of schedule are you on to make sure of when they would be needing to be replaced?
Thank you, Councilmember. At this point, the way we keep track of them is the recreational staff that are located in the parks and also the maintenance staff that are cleaning the parks will put us on notice if any of the playgrounds need replacement. We would be then ordering parts, because often you're not replacing the entire playground, you may be replacing portions of it. We also worked under a former master agreement where we can replace an entire playground. And then we work with DDC if there needs to be a new playground put in. So that's on a case-by-case basis. What we would like to move to is more of an asset management system. So we have draft master agreements that are waiting to be bid out. And under those agreements, we would have be able to do work orders for fixing the resilient rubber surfaces, because a lot of those will crumble under our weather. It's difficult. We have the tile ones where you can replace a tile, but they tend to curl up in the Hawaii humidity and become tripping hazards. And then we have the ground pieces where you get the pukas, where then the kids go, crumble at it more and make it bigger and bigger. We'd like to get that on a regular replacement, pour in place resilient rubber surface contract, and then we would put them on a schedule so that we could get ahead of the maintenance. But that requires us to get the master agreement bid out, and then we can put it into a budget on a session.
Thank you. I know those of us with kids, I've been to the parks, and I understand how the flooring of the equipment gets like that. So is this to replace the flooring, or is this for the actual equipment? Is this replacing a whole jungle gym set, or just removing parts?
So the Hawaii Community Development Authority is taking down an entire playground. We will take all of those pieces. So sometimes a slide may be broken in one playground, and if that slide fits, we can use that to swap it out for a broken slide that we have in one playground. They may have other pieces that match our other playground equipment because it's the same manufacturer. So as we get requests to repair or replace, we can then use those pieces that we get from HCDA to replace. This would not be the surface. The surface is a separate thing. I was just using that as an example of the asset management.
Thank you. And last question. So this one is valued at $5,000. What would it cost is this what the average cost would be for a normal playground to be removed? And is this just the equipment? So then if it was the equipment and the flooring, what would that look like for us?
I'd have to go back and talk to the staff, but if you buy a used car, it's going to be a lot less than a new car. So purchasing new equipment, that is new and not used and exposed to the elements would be more expensive.
Thank you so much, Director Thielen. Thank you, Chair.
Members, any questions? Okay. The chair recommends the resolution 24-153 be adopted, out for adoption. Any discussions? Any objections? Any reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Okay, let's move on to item number 2, resolution 24-168, accepting the gift of travel and related expenses valued at $1,050.43 from the city from the Western Chapter International Society of Arboriculture, WCISA, for staff member of the Department of Parks and Recreation Division of Urban Forestry to attend the WCISA board meeting in Sacramento, California, July 18th and 19th, 2024. And hear from the administration, Director Thielen.
Thank you, council members. Laura Thielen again for Parks and Recreation. As you folks know, our department also has the Division of Urban Forestry, and part of the urban forestry is arboriculture, which is a word I had to learn how to pronounce when I took this job, and I'm still learning how to spell. But these are the arborists that will go on out and they will trim, remove, prune, and take care of street trees and trees in our parks. And we have, I think, the largest number of certified arborists of any organization on Oahu. They do a fabulous job of training their staff. The staff person who would be going to this organization meeting is a proctor for part of the certification exams. We proctor the exams for anybody who wants to take the certification exam on Oahu, but we also do a lot of work in training our staff so they can obtain certification and then move on up through the positions that are available in our organization. It is important to have certified arborists because a lot of times you'll see trees are trimmed by just topping them. And when you just top them, then you go by and you see that where they just basically are bald and they're just a bunch of branches. The branches that grow out of that cut off upper portion are weaker and they're not attached as well. So that would be dangerous if we had people trimming trees on our streets or in our parks that perform that kind of service. So the arboriculture and our certification, arborist certification, will help make sure that we have staff that are doing a good job at keeping people safe in these areas.
Members, do you have any questions for the director? Okay, we will proceed to in-person testimony in the council chamber.
We have no in-person or remote.
And it looks like there's no one here in the chamber, so we'll move on to remote testimony.
There's no one, Mr. Chair.
Okay, members, we are now in discussion. All right, the chair recommends that resolution 24-168 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion? Any objections? Any reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Okay, let's move on to item number 3, resolution 24-167, renaming Likini Street Mini Park to Howard Shima Likini Street Mini Park. This is introduced by you. You wanna explain a little bit about why? Okay, Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Tolba. First off, this resolution will be able to honor someone who's still with us and has been a stalwart for the community. And just as he's been a stalwart for the community, this resolution came from the community. Our neighborhood board, number 18, introduced this resolution to be named after their former chair and former board member who served from 1981 to 2005 on the neighborhood board. And beyond that, you know, from before the 80s even, Salt Lake is and was, and is, I guess still is, a growing community, you know, with the growing population and also welcoming other populations to our area, that he's fought for a lot of the things that are currently in Salt Lake, from the Salt Lake Library and the pool and the parks that we all recreate in Salt Lake are under his steed. And also, as a community member, he has also taken upon himself to be a graffiti buster, which was his name around Salt Lake, where every Saturday people would see him and identify him with his pickup truck and being able to I guess, paint out the graffitis. I was able to meet him when I came to the council as a staff member. It was after he served on the neighborhood board, but I knew him because he was still active in the community, but also as someone who was a mentor and advisor to people on the council for my predecessor. And he's worked with all former council members in my seat since he's been active. And I want to also thank him and his family, because it's without his wife and his children, with their support, that he has been able to make huge moves for Salt Lake. And so this park is actually also a park where a lot of residents and visitors park at, because it is also a municipal lot by the city. And it's also where I hold my pop-up offices if you want to go there. So instead of being at the Likini Street Mini Park, hopefully I'll be able to say that you can meet me at the Howard Shima Likini Street Mini Park. So with that, I would like to ask for everyone's support to honor someone who is so amazing, and we owe a lot in Salt Lake to all the great things in Salt Lake too, as well.
No, that's awesome. I think a lot of times we rename stuff when people are passed away, so it'd be nice that he's there, right? So, Director Thielen, you have any words from the Department of Park and Recreation?
We just want to thank Councilwoman Cordero and her staff for doing such an excellent write-up. We enjoyed reading about Mr. Shima, and he certainly seems deserving. And it would be our pleasure to work with you on this.
Awesome. Members, any questions for the director? Okay, any persons in the chamber that are here to testify?
There is no one in person.
Okay, looks like we have one person remote, right?
Yes.
Okay. And Ms. Shima, you can go ahead.
I I am really touched by the honor, and David Yomes was the person who's the current board chair right now, and he was. I know that my dad worked with him, and so it's really sweet, and we're definitely when I told my dad, his eyes lit up in surprise, and yeah, he was just really like surprised and yeah, caught off guard by the gesture. And David Yomes has put a lot of time into this, and appreciate him. And I had a very nice conversation with Robert Sato, both me and my sister. So yeah, my dad is very honored, and also he knows that my mom also supported him through all of this and played a big role in participating also. So yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Shima. Members, any questions for the testifier? Okay, thank you, Ms. Shima. Is there anyone else testifying online?
No one else, Mr. Chair.
Okay, there being no remote speakers, members, we are in discussion.
No,
Councilmember Cordero, go for it.
I just want to say thank you to the Salt Lake Neighborhood Board number 18 for their recognition of Mr. Howard Shima, and I am very excited to hopefully work with DPR on this. Thank you.
Okay, looks like we'll move forward. Then the chair recommends that resolution 24-167 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion? Any objections? Any reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Okay. Moving on to item number 4, informational briefing. Members, the last item on our agenda today is an update by the Department of Parks and Rec on the status and plans of approximately 400 acres of former Naval Air Station lands at Barbers Point that were conveyed to the city and county of Honolulu from the National Park Service. So here to do the briefing is Director Thielen, and thank you so much. I know we spoke last week and you're willing to do this right away. I wanted to give you some time, and I know some of the members had questions, so we appreciate you being here today.
Okay, thank you. Council members, Laura Thielen on behalf of the Department of Parks and Recreation. So as you know, we just took title to the property. I did not have time to prepare a fancy PowerPoint, but we wanted to get the information in front of you and then to start the conversation about this. I know we'll have ongoing conversation. So what I'll do is I'll just give an overview. I have next to me this bulletin board, so I'm going to do a little Vanna White. Any agency ends up stopping to use property, they have to offer it to other federal agencies. And so I don't know, maybe some of the federal agencies took some of the land, but most of it they did not. They then turn around and make the offer to the state and local governments and other parties. So in that conversation, the city was identified to take a number of parcels, and it would only be able to be used for recreational use. There are certain federal lands that come with that restriction, and these are permanent restrictions. So the use cannot be turned into some other non-recreational use. The National Park Service, once the land transfers to the local government, plays the oversight role to make sure the property remains in recreational use. If the government ever wanted to use it for a different purpose, they would have to find alternative lands to dedicate for recreational use in order to lift that restriction. So it becomes a permanent guarantee to the residents for the city and county of Honolulu that these lands would remain in recreational use. Between the 1980 whatever And 2021, when Mayor Blangiardi was elected and we came into office, there was a lot of back and forth about the property. So the Navy had to go through environmental review, historic review, and again, this is for all the properties that were being dispersed. Some of the lands have gone to DHHL for homes. Other lands have gone out for residential development. There's other uses as well. I'm going to come back to the big one at the end. 13058B. So that's also divided from the larger property by a road. That is located in or near the historic airfield strip, that strip that had been subject to the strafing during the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So that is a historic area. That would not really be appropriate for general recreational use, but maybe more for education and information and historic preservation. You have two properties that are down on the water. So the bottom is the ocean. I should have oriented you first, sorry. The larger piece is 13074, parcels C and D. And C is the one that extends all the way over here. This is where we have an existing campsite that we inherited from the Navy and we've been managing. But because we didn't have title to it, there is a comfort station there that's on a cesspool that had to be closed down because we could not invest capital improvement bond funding money to upgrade that since we didn't have the title to it. So that comfort station was closed and we have a number of porta potties there. We've not been able to make the kind of security improvements to it to help make the camping a little bit safer. This is an area where the existing camping is just in a small portion of that property. And that's something that we could probably do early on to work on revitalizing, getting that comfort station back online up with the current regulations, and maybe expanding some of the camping area. But the previous review of the area, while it didn't find contaminants on this, it did find cultural sites. So what's important to remember is the Navy went through a federal review with the State Historic Preservation Division, but we also have State Historic Preservation Division laws. And when we met with the State Historic Preservation Division, they said any development of any of these properties is going to have to go through the State Historic Preservation Review. And so this area, you know, we don't have any plans. We know that there's cultural sites in the areas outside of the campgrounds farther down, and it probably would be best to be working with the Native Hawaiian community and community partners in that area to do a further investigation of what's located there. Originally, you may have heard people referring to this property as the Ala Moana Beach Park West, but given the cultural sites that are in there, we don't anticipate that's ever going to look like Ala Moana Beach Park, and so there would need to be further investigation done and work with various partners to determine what could go on there. Then before getting to the big parcel in the middle, you see this little parcel in the downtown area, 13064D. I'm calling that the downtown area. This area is one of the areas where the Hawaii Community Development Authority is handling the zoning, and the HCDA Kalailoa plan is calling for this to be a downtown area because the areas that are up towards the top of the map are going to be residential, and then you have some large DHHL residential areas located as well. So right now, I think we use some of that portion for some of our driver training, and most of the parcels around it are not really in use. So that leaves the large two parcels in the middle. This bigger one, 13059B, and then you'll see there's kind of like a thumb sticking in, which is 13059C. That thumb sticking in the smaller parcel that's surrounded by the larger B parcel is what's known as the coral pit. So apparently that's kind of a pit in the land, and that was used back when this was a naval air station in World War II, basically for chucking a lot of stuff. So the initial environmental review that the Navy conducted did find that there were contaminants in the coral pit, and what they had said is you should not allow overnight camping, and this should be an area that would maybe need to be fenced off. So we do not know at this point what may be usable. But in talking to the Department of Health, they said the groundwater in this area is below the underground injection line. It's brackish groundwater. It is not mixing with our potable water aquifers. You know, so what they would say for anything for recreational use, as you know, would be okay. If you guys know Kaka'ako Regional Park, that's built on a former landfill. So clean soil was brought in. It's capped. You don't allow people to dig there. You know, it's more of a passive recreation area, but that is safe for people to recreate on. So that would be, the coral pit would be something that would be, again, more of a longer term. But that is the area where the records found that there may have been materials containing PFAS that was used. So the Navy has sent the city a letter, and they made the commitment again when we had the announcement for the title transfer and the signing that many of you attended the other day. They are going to be following that record review with soil sampling and other specific tests. They, in the meantime, have some restrictions on the property because they don't know what they're going to find. They anticipate that that will take a few years to be able to get all the information, and then they would work, if there's any subsequent cleanup or anything that's needed, they would take care of that aspect. In the meantime, The larger property that surrounds it, just because a portion of it is down towards the ocean, and the assumption is any groundwater would be traveling downwards towards the ocean, that also has similar restrictions on it. But because the property isn't subdivided, that restriction applies to the entire property. So there may be the possibility of subdividing that larger piece, right, just above where that coral pit is, and that may open up the upper portions for recreational use and end up removing those restrictions. So again, we're still in the very early days of discussion. The title just transferred. There's certain things that we need to complete in the first 3 months, so we are working with that. We know that there is very, very long-term strong interest in having some type of motorsports facility at the property. The group has done a very good job in planning ahead because they did get into the state comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, or the SCORP, that the state parks does every 5 years with federal funding. And so once they've got that in the state comprehensive plan, we need to go back to the National Park Service. Remember, they're the oversight to make sure everything remains in recreational use, and request to amend the program of utilization, because the current city program of utilization does not include a motorsports facility on it. We have talked with the National Park Service. It's something that they have approved, but it's a process that we're going to have to go through with them. And so we've been discussing that with them about, what would their review entail and what their forms are and things like that. So we're still in the very early days of this, but, we're delighted to take the property. We agree that this is really important for the people in the west part of Oahu. And we look forward to working with you and the community out there in ultimately building out more recreational opportunities. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director. That was awesome. Thank you for the presentation. All right, members, questions. Okay, Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director Thielen, for your presentation and being able to provide it, even though the announcement just happened. So first off, starting from, I guess, the ground up really is about the infrastructure. I know you did talk a little bit about that, and I know that we are, I guess, in the planning and even designing stages for a lot of the area. But do we know the capacity for infrastructure for water and everything else right now?
The Hawaii Community Development Authority has been working with the various property owners in there. We need to, now that we have title, because we just had constructive possession before, we need to go work with the Hawaii Community Development Authority and get up to speed on their plans for bringing infrastructure into the location. We know that the title owners each pays fees to help with that infrastructure. We know there is some infrastructure, like to that former Navy building, which was the telegraph building, and the campsite clearly has water and electrical and not sewer because it was on the cesspool, but to the comfort station. But certainly in building out other areas, we will be needing to bring in utilities to larger areas. And it is very
access and management. And I know that we don't specifically do that. Like we do like the actual parks and not the actual water and beaches. But I was wondering if you have any thoughts about how it's going to be managed, since there is an oversight, but we have the land, and I don't know how that will look like, or how you're thinking of it.
In some ways, a lot of that was resolved back in 2016 because the Navy said to the city, if you guys want this property, you need to take constructive possession of it now. So the city has been managing the campsites since 2016. We do work with the Navy because the Navy still has this beach property here with some cabins. And so we've worked with them and 808 Hawaii, the group that does a lot of volunteer work, on trying to make sure that we have boulders and barricades to stop people from driving on the beach. We permit camping. I've camped out there before, just to test it out. So, yeah, and the beach access is very important. So the existing access that's being provided on the property will continue, and we would like to, we're not, when we talk about improving it, I'd just like to get a working bathroom. You know, if you're camping, you're not talking about making it really fancy or overwhelming. But I think some better security, because our campsites that do have gates, you know, people, they're more popular with people because they feel more safe when they're in them.
Thank you. And my last question for this round, I guess, is, okay, so with the 400 acres and around it with the rest of Kailua and Barbers Point, where's the closest communities that, I guess, touch the 400 acres, like residents-wise? Oh, at the bottom. Oh,
So I will bring you folks a map in the future with the Hawaii Community Development Authority zoning for the area. So I am flying a little bit blind here. I know one of the adjacent parcels is the DHHL lands. And it may be either this lower area, and I believe along that stretch along the top are also residential. There may be a school in there at some point because the state also did take.
types of recreational, like, I guess the definition of recreational under the federal government?
Sure. So when you use the term recreational, the National Park Service asks the local government, which in this case is us, you tell us what you want to use it for, and you submit an application. So the city submitted an application, and that was called the Program of Utilization. I don't know why they picked these terms, but, and then the National Park Service would say, yes, 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 no, yes, no, no, no. And so then they are the ones that, you know, kind of define what's recreation. We've spoken to the regional National Park Service director, who's located on the West Coast. And what he's told me is what they look for is recreation where the residents are doing the recreation. It's not a spectator sport. Because what they want to see is they want to see these are lands that are utilized by people for recreation. It could be active recreation like ball fields, soccer fields. It could be kind of multi-purpose recreation like a pool where it could be, you know, swim teams, but it also could be water aerobics or family swim or swim lessons. It could be gymnasiums. They have done motor raceways, but it's, again, not the spectator version. It's the version where the residents are given the opportunity to do the racing. So it's a pretty wide definition, but that's where we're going to go back and take a look at the current program of utilization that the city has approved, and we know that the motor raceway is not in it, so we know that we're going to have to go back to them to get permission to add that into it.
Thank you, Director, and thank you, Chair Tolba.
Thank you. Questions? Councilmember Dos Santos.
Thank you, Chair. I realize we just took ownership of these, but could you talk about what kind of future expenses might look like? How does this affect your, maintenance budget if you're expected now to maintain all of these acres? And then just looking forward, building upon Councilmember Cordero's question, what are some of the immediate or obvious kind of future investments that the Park Department might need to make to really get these properties into recreational use?
Thank you for that question. So the city is going to need to make an investment in the area. The city made a lot of investments in urban Honolulu, East Honolulu, certain areas on the windward side and the North Shore. We haven't made quite the same volume of investments in this region. But if you look at like our 25 gyms, our 21 pools, they're really located in those other areas that I mentioned. So I think there's the initial cost, which is the planning, the entitlements, the design, the construction, and then you've got your longer term costs, which is the maintenance. We know that the city has a finite amount of resources, so we want to approach this in a smart way, and I think that's where we really sit down and take a hard look at it up front. Things like public-private partnerships are options, but I think the city wants to have a finite horizon. They're not the permanent owner of the property. So, you know, what would that look like? We have models like Central Oahu Regional Park, NYPO Soccer Peninsula, where when those were developed, because they were fairly large developments, the council did adopt a fee structure for those activities that were in the area to help offset those long-term maintenance costs. They were not sufficient to pay for the capital improvements, but they do help offset the long-term maintenance, including some of the replacement of the capital improvements. So I think that's a discussion that should be on the table. The city was very cautious when they did do the fee structure at Central Oahu Regional Park, NYPO, to keep things affordable, because we have a lot of families that are, you know, that Alice household, they do not have the ability to pay for a lot. So, you know, it's something that was low, but it accumulates and can help offset those maintenance costs. And then we want to take a look at other park districts to see what types of creative ideas that they have done to provide ongoing costs for this. I did share something with the National Park Service that you folks may have heard of a park that was built in New York a little while ago. It's called Dumbo, down under the Manhattan Bridge overpass. They took, there was a series of 4-acre docks going out into the Hudson. Each dock was 4 acres. And they designed those as parks. The land came with some commercial operations on the land. So they took that 10% of the land that had commercial operations and put all the revenues from that commercial operations into a trust to pay for the improvements and ongoing operations and maintenance of the 90% of the area that was the park. You know, this would be kind of a novel idea. I mentioned the restrictions on the property, but I think everyone today is cognizant of the fact that governments are facing huge infrastructure bills, and we have a congressional delegation that's very realistic and pragmatic about that, and so it may be something that we want to explore, but that would be a longer-term thing, but that's where this property that may be in a downtown area might be useful for that.
And then to the point about using some of this for non-recreational, you mentioned there would have to be an offset somewhere else. Does that have to be in West Oahu? Can that be in another part of the island if we want to have, say, a conservation easement to offset some development elsewhere, and we put that into you know, recreational bird watching sanctuary, something, you know, something like that? Can we get creative?
Well, the offset would be determined by the National Park Service, not by the city. And so they would be the ones to determine whether it was sufficient. I don't know that they would be restrictive on the, you know, it has to be in the same region or different regions. I think for the city, though, you definitely would have to have that discussion with, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think it would, you know, behoove us, especially if we want to do that kind of New York scenario where there's some revenue generation on that 7-acre parcel. Maybe we start looking at some other offsets.
I think we could also have a discussion with the National Park Service about whether they would allow that as part of the trust, so that it would restrict the funding in perpetuity for supporting the recreational operation, because otherwise you couldn't restrict, you know, would that funds continue to be used for that purpose 10 years from now?
Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Thielen, I was just wondering if when the land was given to the city, prior to that, did the military do any, or maybe it's our responsibility now to do any type of investigation of the ground beneath it? I know in other parcels of land throughout the island, they have found later that there's military things that were buried in the ground from trainings from before, or different things that the military had left behind. Was that done at all in this 400-acre piece of land that was given to us?
Yes, so as part of the original BRAC transfer of land, the Navy was required to go through a environmental review of the property with the EPA and the State Department of Health acting as the EPA designated authority in Hawaii. So we did meet at that first, when I first came in that first year, part of our due diligence was meeting with the Department of Health. And so they have approved the environmental review and the mitigating measures. And that's where they was explaining to us that, for recreational use, it would mainly be in the areas where there was a history, given what was found in the testing that was done, capping that area with clean soil, that should be sufficient. And then the non-PFAS contamination that was found in that brackish groundwater, they said the same thing, is they wouldn't require remediation for those things, but just not using that particular area, capping it off, and not utilizing that water for anything, which we wouldn't do anyway because salt water would kill the grass.
Okay, so it was mainly PFAS, though, nothing other than that?
No, this was before the review for PFAS. They did a review for all other things. For the more recent review that they did, they found a record that materials were used in that one coral pit area that may have contained PFAS. They are now launching a new environmental review investigation just for that PFAS, and they have given us a letter of commitment that if anything is found and if the EPA requires any type of cleanup, that they will take care of that.
Okay, and just to clarify what you mentioned earlier, you said that whatever was found, putting topsoil was sufficient enough in those specific locations.
In the initial review, which did not include PFAS. So
Okay.
there's, two reviews. The first review was done in earlier days, and
How long ago was that? So when you say in the earlier days, I was just curious when the process started.
I'm sorry, I'd have to get the date for you, but it was a review that they went through with the State Department of Health, and when I started in '21, we met and spoke with the Department of Health, and the gentleman who is the head of that section, has been there during that period of time, so it wasn't ancient days.
And the second review came just recently.
The second review came just recently because of the order from the Navy headquarters.
Thank you so much, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Questions? Okay. We will now proceed with in-person testimony in the council.
There is no one, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Knowing there's no one in here, so remote testimony?
No one has logged on.
Okay. Members, we are in discussion. Thank you, Director. For the public, if you can restate for us what's the next steps are, and if you can provide us with an update at a later time, that'd be awesome.
Okay, so next steps are that the Navy and Park Service are requiring us to do certain actions within the first 3 months of taking title. So that's first steps. One is we need to post signage in the area that the property was transferred to the city by the federal government, which we will be working on. And then the other is filing an application with the State Department of Health about capping for dry wells. So we're going to be working on that as well. Then following that, we will be working with an amendment to the National Park Service for that program of utilization to expand the authorized uses on that property to include a motorsports facility. So that would be the next step. And then I think we need to be working on the planning for it, and then we would be happy to update you as we move along.
Awesome. Thank you, Director. Councilmember Say.
Director Thielen, one question. As far as the development jurisdiction, does HTDA control that area? Like Kailailoa, He'ea, Kaka'ako?
Yes, this is part of the Kalailoa HCDA jurisdiction. So they would take care of the zoning. But these properties, I believe, are all designated for recreational use because HCDA came in, the legislature granted it authority, I think, as part of the whole decommissioning of the base.
Okay. So HCDA for Chair Toba, next year you should ask the state legislature to put the money in for the infrastructure. because HCDA is the development arm of the state and of the property itself. They may ask the city to, chip in a few dollars, but in the meantime, they could have the infrastructure in place in the next 4 years. So I'm looking at it, 5 years deadline for you in getting this done. I don't know, Director Thielen. I said 5 years in getting it done. Can it be done? Because you gotta go DDC, you gotta go, you name it, right?
Well, again, Hawaii development does take time. And when we're talking about 400 acres, these are discontiguous parcels. So deciding what would be done down on the ocean compared to the Mauka parcels, those are two very different things that may go in there. We are going to have to go through State Historic Preservation Division review because of the historic sites, and some of those sites are on the Mauka area because of the military use and the other things in that area. So what's important is, this administration said we need these lands. We moved on them very quickly. We took title to them when it's been sitting there since the 1980s, and when prior administrations actually returned some usable property back, which just breaks my heart. So we will continue to progress, and we're not going to stop because we want to see these areas developed for recreational use for the people on the west side of Oahu.
And I would just put in a punch also for industrial use, please. Industrial use.
So again, we cannot use these properties for industrial use. These properties do have the recreational restriction, which I'm psyched about because, yeah, I think that's going to be great for people.
How about solar farms? Whereby nope,
Nope,
no
not
solar
recreation.
farms?
So you're going to have to look to other properties, and that's really the beauty of the protection of these lands, is this is for recreational use.
I think the director said downtown, new downtown in the future. So we just have to keep our fingers crossed, yeah, and see this thing through. It is exciting, and I think that's the reason why, a lot of us had the questions that we had, and we want to see, equity throughout the city. So thank you, Director Thielen.
But we would like to include photovoltaic and water catchment and things in our development so we can reduce our long-term operating costs.
Yeah, that'll be good. That'd be good. Mahalo, everyone, for attending and participating in today's meeting. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned 2 times.